Now read this.
Hello and welcome back to Now Read This. I hope you all had a very Merry Christmas and a Happy New Year. We are continuing Lloyd Alexander's The Chronicles of Prydain, Book 3, The Castle of Llyr, Chapter 4, Shadows. The feast that evening was surely the merriest the castle had ever seen. Cor, perched on the back of Taran's chair, bobbed up and down and looked as if the banquet had been arranged entirely in his honour. King Rudlum beamed with good spirits. The talk and laughter of the guests rang through the great hall. Behind the long table crowded with Queen Taleria's ladies of the court, Mag flitted back and forth, snapping his fingers and whispering commands to servitors bearing endless dishes of food and flagons of drink. For Taran it was a waking nightmare. He sat silent and uneasy, his repast untouched. "You needn't look so gloomy," said Eilonwy. "After all, you aren't the one who has to stay here. If I'm trying to make the best of things, I must say you're not exactly being helpful. I want to remind you I'm still not speaking to you after the way you behaved today." Without waiting to hear Taran's confused protests, Eilonwy tossed her head and began chattering to Prince Rune. Taran bit his lip. He felt as though he was shouting a voiceless warning, while Eilonwy, all unwitting, raced gaily toward the brink of a cliff. At the end of the feasting, Fflewddur tuned his harp, stepped to the middle of the hall, and sang his new lay. Taran listened without pleasure, although he realized it was the best Fflewddur had yet composed. When the bard had done, and King Rudlum had begun to yawn, the guests rose from their seats at the table. Taran plucked Fflewddur's sleeve and drew him aside. "I've been thinking about the stables," Taran said anxiously. "No matter what Mag says, it's not a fitting place for you to sleep. I'll speak to King Rudlum, and I'm sure he'll order Mag to give you back your chamber in the castle." Taran hesitated. I think somehow it would be better if we were all together. We are all strangers here and know nothing of the ways of this place." "Great Belin, don't give yourself a moment's concern about that," replied the bard. "For my part, I prefer the stables. Indeed, that's the one reason I go wandering, to get away from the stuffy, dreary castles. Besides," he added behind his hand, "it would lead to trouble with Mag, and if he pushes me beyond endurance, there will be sword-play. A flam is hot-headed, which is hardly courteous behaviour from a guest. No, we shall all be fine, and meet again in the morning." So saying, Fflewddur shouldered his harp, waved good night, and made his way from the hall. "Something tells me we should keep an eye on the castle," Taran said to Gurgi. He put a forefinger under Cor's feet and set the bird on Gurgi's shoulder, where the crow immediately began running his beak through Gurgi's matted hair. "Stay close to Eilonwy's chamber," he went on. "I'll join you soon. Keep Cor with you, and send him to me if anything seems amiss." Gurgi nodded. Yes, he whispered. "Loyal Gurgi will stand with watchful waitings. He will guard dreamful drowsings of noble princess." Unnoticed among the departing guests, Taran walked to the courtyard. Hoping to find Gwydion, he strode quickly toward the stables. Stars filled the clear night sky, and a bright moon hung above the crags of Mona. In the stables, Taran discovered no trace of the Prince of Dawn, but came only upon Fflewddur curled up in the straw, his arm flung around his harp, and already snoring peacefully. Taran turned once more to the castle, which had by now fallen into darkness. He stood a moment, wondering where else he might seek. Hello! Prince Rune burst from around a corner at such a rate he nearly sent Taran sprawling. "Still awake, are you? So am I. My mother says it's good for me to take a little stroll before sleeping. I suppose you're doing the same. Very good. We shall walk along together." "That we shall not," Taran retorted. Now of all times he had no wish to be hindered by the feckless prince. I seek the tailors," he added quickly. "Where are they lodged?" "You're looking for tailors?" Rune asked. "How odd! Whatever for?" "My jacket," Taran hurriedly answered. It fits me badly. I must ask them to fix it." "In the middle of the night?" asked Rune, his moon-face puzzled. "Now that really is surprising." He pointed toward a shadowed side of the castle. "Their chambers are down there, but I shouldn't think they'd be in a humour to stitch well if you roused them up out of a sleep.
Tailors can be touchy, you know. I advise you to wait until morning.
No, it must be done now, Taran said, impatient to be rid of Roon. The prince shrugged, wished him a cheerful good night, and trotted off again. Taran made his way toward a cluster of sheds beyond the stable. His search there was also in vain. Discouraged, he had decided to rejoin Gurgi when he stopped suddenly. A figure was moving quickly across the courtyard, not toward the main portal, but to the farthest angle of the heavy stone wall. Could Eilonwy have slipped away from Gurgi? Taran was about to call out. Then, fearful of waking the castle, he hurried after the figure. An instant later, it seemed to disappear completely. Taran pressed on. At the wall, he stumbled upon a narrow opening, barely wide enough to squeeze through. Taran plunged through the curtain of ivy concealing it, and found himself beyond the castle, on a rocky slope overlooking the harbour. The figure, Taran suddenly realized, was not Eilonwy. Too tall, the gait different. He caught his breath as the cloaked figure turned once for a furtive glance at the castle, and the moonlight glittered for a moment over its features. It was Mag. Spider-like, the chief steward was rapidly picking his way down a path. In a surge of fear and suspicion, Taran clambered blindly over jagged stones, trying his best to be both swift and silent. Despite the clear night, the way was difficult to follow. Boulders loomed to catch him unawares and break his stride. He longed for the light of Eilonwy's bauble as he scrambled headlong after Mag toward the sleeping harbour. Mag had come to level ground well ahead of Taran and was scuttling along the sea wall until, at the far end, he reached a huge pile of rocks. With surprising agility, the chief steward swung himself up, crawled over, and once more dropped out of sight. Casting caution aside, fearful he would lose track of Mag, Taran broke into a run. Along the wall, moon-bright water lapped and whispered. A shadow moved for an instant among the stilted piers. In alarm, Taran checked his pace, then hastened on. His eyes were playing tricks. Even the rocks themselves seemed to rise before him like crouching, threatening beasts. Gritting his teeth, Taran climbed the dark barrier of rocks. Below, the water churned in glittering eddies and foamed among the stones. The surf rang in his ears as he hauled himself to the crest. There he clung, not daring to follow farther. Mag had stopped not many paces beyond, at the edge of a narrow spit of land. Taran saw him kneel and make a rapid motion. In another instant, a light flared. The chief steward had lit a torch and now raised it overhead, moving the flickering flame slowly back and forth. As Taran watched, fearful and puzzled, a tiny point of orange light glowed far seaward. This answering signal, Taran judged, could come only from a ship, though he could make out nothing of the vessel's shape or distance. Mag waved the torch again, in a different pattern. The light from the ship repeated it, then winked out. Mag thrust his torch into the black water where it sputtered and died. He turned and strode quickly toward the tumble of rocks where Taran lay. Taran, left blinking in the sudden darkness, sought to clamber down before Mag should come upon him, but could find no foothold. In panic he groped for a jutting stone below him, slipped, caught vainly for another. He could hear Mag scrabbling up the far side, and let himself fall among the rocks. Wincing at the sharp pain, he tried to hide in the shadows. Mag's head had just appeared at the crest when Taran was seized firmly from behind. Taran snatched out his sword. A hand was clapped over his mouth, stifling his shout, and he was dragged rapidly toward the foaming wavelets, to be flung silently down amid the stones. "Make no sound," Gwydion's voice whispered the command. Taran went limp with relief. Overhead, Mag lowered himself from the mass of stones and passed no more than a dozen paces from the two crouching figures. Gwydion, clinging to the rocks above the surf, motioned for Taran to stay hidden. The chief steward, without a backward glance, hastened once more along the sea wall, heading for the castle. "Seize him," Taran urged. "A ship rides at anchor. I saw him signal it. We must make him tell us what he is about." Gwydion shook his head. His green eyes followed the retreating Mag, and his lips drew tightly against his teeth in the lean smile of a stalking wolf. He still wore the rags of a shoemaker, but Dernwyn, the black sword, now hung at his belt. "Let him go," he murmured. "The game is not played out." But the signal, Taran began. Gwydion nodded. I, too, saw it. I have been keeping watch over the castle since I left you, though a moment ago, he added, with some severity, I feared an assistant pigkeeper would stumble into a snare set to catch a traitor. Would you serve me, then return at once to the castle? Stay close by the princess. Dare we let Mag go unhindered? Taran asked. He must go unhindered for a time, at least, replied Gwydion. The shoemaker will soon put down his awl and take up the sword. Until then, keep silent. I would not spoil Mag's scheme before I learn more of it. The fisher folk of Mona have already told a curious and harmless shoemaker part of what he must know, Gwydion continued. Enough to be certain of one thing. Acren is aboard that vessel. Yes, Gwydion went on as Taran drew a sharp breath. This much I suspected. Acren herself would not dare strike directly against Eilonwy. The castle is strong and well guarded. Only treachery could open its gates. Acren needed a hand to do her bidding. Now I know whose it is. Gwydion frowned deeply as he spoke on. But why, he murmured almost to himself. Too much still remains hidden. If it is as I fear, he shook his head quickly. It does not please me to use Eilonwy as unwitting bait for a trap, but I cannot do otherwise. Mag can be watched, Taran said. But what of Acren? I must find some means to learn her plan as well as Mag's, replied Gwydion. Go quickly now, he ordered. Soon all may grow clear. So I hope, for I would not see the Princess Eilonwy long in peril. Taran hastened to obey Gwydion's command. Leaving the Prince of Dawn at the harbour, he made his way with all speed up the winding path to the castle, found the opening in the wall, and pressed through it into the dark courtyard. Eilonwy, he knew, would not be safe so long as Mag had the freedom of the castle, but Mag, at least, could be watched. The terror that chilled Taran's heart came from the ship waiting in the night. Memory of Acren, beautiful and merciless, again returned to him. From a day long past, he recalled her livid face, her voice that had spoken so softly of torment and death. It was her shadow that loomed behind the treacherous chief steward. He hurried silently across the courtyard. A dim light shone from one of the chambers. Stealthily, Taran moved toward it, raised himself on tiptoe, and peered through the casement. In the glow of an oil lamp, he saw the chief steward. Mag clutched a long dagger, which he brandished in the air, all the while making fierce grimaces. After a time he hid the weapon in his garments, then picked up a small looking-glass, into which he smiled, pursed his lips, and eyed himself with glances of deep satisfaction. Taran watched with rage and horror, hardly able to keep from bursting in upon him. With a final smirk, the chief steward put out the lamp. Taran clenched his fists, turned away, and entered the castle. At Eilonwy's chamber he found Gurgi crouched on the flagstones. Rumpled and half asleep, Gurgi blinked and sprang to his feet. Cor, as tousled as Gurgi himself, popped his head from under his wing. All is quiet, Gurgi whispered. Yes, watchful Gurgi has not moved from portal. Valiant, sleepy Gurgi keeps noble princess from harmful hurtings. His poor tender head is heavy, but he does not nod. Oh no. You have done well, Taran said. Sleep, my friend. Go and rest that poor tender head of yours, and I shall stay here until daylight. While Gurgi, yawning and rubbing his eyes, crept down the corridor, Taran took his place before the chamber. He sank to the flagstones, and with hand on sword rested his head on his knees, and fought against his own weariness. Once or twice, despite his efforts, he drowsed, then started up suddenly. The vaulted corridor slowly lightened in the rising dawn. With relief, Taran saw the first rays of morning, and at last allowed himself to close his eyes. Taran of Caerdalban! He stumbled to his feet and clutched his blade. Eilonwy, looking fresh and well-rested, stood in the doorway. Taran of Caerdalban, she declared. I nearly tripped over you. What in the world are you doing? Befuddled, Taran could only stammer that he had found the hallway more comfortable than his chamber. Eilonwy shook her head. That, she remarked, is the silliest thing I've heard this morning. I may hear something sillier because it's yet early, but I doubt it. I'm beginning to think the ways of assistant pigkeepers are quite beyond me. She shrugged. In any case, I'm going to breakfast.
After you wash your face and untangle your hair, you might have some too. It would do you good. You look as jumpy as a frog with fleas.
Without waiting for Taran to shake the sleep from his head, and before he could stop her, Eilonwy disappeared down the corridor. Taran hurried after her. Even in the bright morning, he felt shadows cling to him like black spiderwebs. By now, he hoped, Gwydion had discovered Akron's plan. But Mag still went free. Taran, recalling the chief steward's hidden dagger, had no intention of letting Eilonwy out of his sight for an instant.
Hello, hello.
His round face glowing as if he had just scrubbed it, Prince Rune popped out of his chamber just as Taran passed by.
Going to breakfast?
Cried the prince, clapping Taran on the shoulder.
Good, so am I.
Then we shall meet in the great hall, Taran hastily replied, striving to shake himself loose from Rune's friendly grasp.
Amazing how one's appetite grows during the night,
Prince Rune went on.
Oh, by the way, did you ever manage to rouse the tailors?
Tailors? Taran answered impatiently. What tailors? Oh, yes, they've done what I asked, he quickly added, peering down the corridor.
Splendid, cried Rune. I wish I had the same good fortune. Do you know that shoemaker never did finish my sandals? He'd only just begun, then off he went, and that was the end of them.
It may be he had something more important to do, Taran replied, as do I.
What could be more important to a shoemaker than making shoes?
Asked Rune.
However, he snapped his fingers. Ah, I knew there was something. I'd forgotten my cloak. Hold on, I should only be a moment.
Prince Rune, Taran cried, I must join the Princess Eilonwy.
We shall be there directly, called Rune from the chamber. Oh, drat, there goes my sandal lace broken. I do wish that shoemaker had finished his work.
Leaving the Prince of Mona still rummaging in the chamber, Taran sped anxiously to the great hall. King Rudlum and Queen Teleria were already at table, the Queen surrounded, as always, by her ladies. Taran looked quickly about him. Mag, usually in attendance, was not there, nor was there any sign of Eilonwy.
Hey, you want to buy something? You can check the description for my books and audiobooks. Thank you so much for watching, and don't forget to like and subscribe for more content.